So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a couple stories. So the first is going to be a story around my personal experience with education. Then I'll share a couple stories of, what we've been working on internally at Skillshare and what's been happening. So the first story starts with where I went to grad school, and this is the VCU Brand Center, and it was one of the top-ranked schools for advertising and marketing and branding. And I felt really lucky to get in because I felt I was like the least creative person on the planet, but for some reason they let me into school. And the first day of school was with this professor named Mark Fensky. And Mark Fensky was really known in the industry for helping create the brand Nike. So on the first day of class, he was known to just basically tear people apart, tell them their ideas sucked. And he taught the first class I took, which was on creative thinking. So, very bright, wide-eyed, you're like, wow, this is the guy that created Nike. I walked into the room, his auditorium just like this, and I sat down. So he walks in very slowly, walks up to the front of the room, gets up, and welcomes everyone to the class. And all he says is the word gum. That was it. He said gum, and he said, next week, you guys, each of you have 60 seconds to come up here and present something on gum. And he just walked out of the classroom. So from someone that went to traditional schooling where you have test quizzes, I was expecting a syllabus. I was expecting everyone to stand up and say where you're from, what your favorite childhood memory was, and something unique about yourself. That totally didn't happen. So at first we thought it was a joke. We thought he's going to come back in, he's going to, tell us exactly what we're supposed to do. He never came back. He just went back to his office, grabbed his beer, and just started drinking and just hung out for the rest of the day. So, this is the first day of class. We're all looking at each other like, so what are we supposed to do? Did he mean bubble gum? Your gums? What are we supposed to do in those 60 seconds? So we all left class. We're like, well, are we allowed to leave class? The girl's like, well, when I went to school, if the teacher doesn't come back in 15 minutes, you could technically leave. So half the class left, the other half were like, I don't know if he might come back. So we all left, and then for the first couple of days, I didn't know what to do. I had no direction. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And that class was on a Wednesday at 9 a.m. and Thursday went by and Friday went by. Over the weekend, I procrastinated, didn't really think too much. And then Monday, everyone comes back to school and everyone starts freaking out. They're like, shit, we have to present something on Wednesday for 60 seconds, and it's a creative thinking class. This whole school's around creativity, so we should do something creative. And I think that's when everyone started switching gears. They're like, hey, what's your idea? What's your idea? And what I witnessed that morning was some of the most creative things I've ever seen. So this actually didn't happen. I just Google searched something that looked cool with gum. But that morning, this kid came up and he tried to break the Guinness World Record around the biggest bubble. I saw someone put together a 60-second documentary on all the gum they would find underneath the tables, and some artist did this, which is really cool, like a human sculpture. But what was really unique about that experience, it was very, very different from what I ever experienced before. And I went to that school feeling I was the least creative, and I left thinking I was the most creative person on the planet. And it's because the way the school is structured is around collaboration. We didn't really compete with each other. It was very subjective. It was fun. We were allowed to be curious. We never had tests, but we never had to buy a book. I never had tests. I never had quizzes. But I learned so many skills that are very applicable today. And actually, what I believe is why Skillshare is so successful. I learned how to work with people. I learned how to communicate. I learned how to think about ideas. I learned how to have any problem thrown your way and you could solve those. I learned how to work in teams. I learned so many things that are really critical and really important. So switching gears, this is the totally opposite of how I learn. So I'm pretty sure everyone has this experience, some guy in the front of the room writing on a chalkboard. And that was my experience at the University of Virginia. So while I went to grad school and felt like that was the best education I ever received, I thought my education at the University of Virginia was not the best education I ever received. I majored in econ. I'm terrible at math, even though I'm Asian. I know everyone thinks all Asian people are good at math. I'm really not that good at math. I majored in econ as the finance major because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. And my whole life revolved around partying, sleeping in, playing video games, memorizing everything I could for a test, regurgitating it, walking on, forgetting everything, and moving on. And I'm pretty sure that was the experience that everyone else had, or most people. or I probably shouldn't say any of those things. But what was a huge wake-up call for me is when I graduated, I got hit with this huge tuition bill. Not something you're thinking about when you're graduating, because the backstory behind that is I grew up in Seoul, which is in South Korea, and I thought growing up in Seoul was the most awesome thing you could possibly ever do for any kids. But then when I was around the 5th grade, my parents decided that I needed to go to college, like all parents, so they moved me to Virginia, and that's how I ended up at the University of Virginia. So all the way from the 5th grade all the way till my senior year in high school, everything was about getting to college. It was every extracurricular activity, memorizing things, studying your ass off for the SAT, doing everything you possibly could go into college. And then when I graduated in 2004, I just felt like I got duped. Everything that was promised, success and great job and a great career and this huge network of people that will make you successful, didn't really happen. And that, for me, was a huge wake-up call. So a couple months ago, I read this article that Clay Shirky wrote about Napster. And Napster was a really interesting thing. He related to education. Because have you guys heard of Napster? Anyone heard of Napster's awesome company? I mean, I think this is what, I don't think I've paid for a song since I've got introduced to Napster, until Spotify, which is awesome too. But the whole idea, he said, behind Napster was that even though the record labels took it down, so Napster came out, it was all about sharing files with other people, and what they would typically share was music, so people would send music to each other. And the record labels were like, this is so bad, it's going to take our industry down, so we have to shut it down. So they shut it down. But what it really did, and what Clay Shirky writes about, is that it kind of opened up the eyes of everyone of why the music industry was so backwards. There's this record label, there's 5 guys in a room that dictates what artists break out, which artist gets played. And what it really did, what Clay Shirky wrote, is that it really opened the eyes to all these entrepreneurs that they could literally take out the record label if they wanted to. So even though the music industry took down Napster, they didn't take down every other company that came out after that. And you can see that all the way to Spotify and RDO. So now, even though the record labels didn't take out Napster, they influenced all these other companies that pop up, because all they did was open up their eyes to what was possible. And that's how I kind of feel about the internet with education. So for me, when I graduated from the University of Virginia, it really opened my eyes to questioning my college education. It really got me to really question the value and why from the age, from the 5th grade to when I graduated high school and college, that this was what I was supposed to do. This was a path that somebody told my parents that I was supposed to take, so they made me take this path. And when I juxtaposed that to the education I got at VCU, I was like, why didn't I not just go to this school for my entire life? Why did I have to go to these schools and learn math and all these other subjects that someone else told me that I was supposed to learn that I didn't even care about? So when we started thinking about Skillshare, we always looked at the internet as kind of like the wild, wild west. So if the wild, wild west, you could go out there, you're looking for gold. You could literally kill someone if you wanted to. You could literally do anything because nothing was set up in the wild. It was basically pure anarchy. And then people came in, they started building the towns, and the sheriff showed up, and there was outlaws that would run around. And the internet was very similar to that over the past 20 years. So you think about all the billion-dollar big companies that have evolved over time, they follow this trend of building a town or a city or a community online. So the first thing that got invented was a computer. Then after that, the internet kind of got introduced, and then after that, the browser got introduced to view things on web pages. And then AOL got, just blew up because you had to build the roads to get on the internet. And then, Facebook got created because you had to build some type of social networking community. And all these companies are popping up, and I think what we're starting to see today is companies are trying to build a school online, and I think that's kind of where the ballpark of where we're playing. So if you think about what happened with Napster, the music industry, I think what's happening in society right now is everyone's questioning the value of a higher education, or just questioning education in general. And that's kind of how we've approached how we've been building Skillshare for the past 2 years. So part of the interview process at Skillshare, and a question that we ask each other every single day, if we really believe the internet's this new thing, like if you had to rebuild education from the ground up, for the 21st century, what would it look like today? So surprisingly, everyone thinks like, at a startup, you're always, talking about how to build your company and, how are you going to take over the world, which we definitely talk about that. But what we talk about the most is how should people learn today and how should people learn online? So I'll shift gears and tell a second story about some classes that have been happening on Skillshare. So about 6 months ago, we launched online classes. And what I'll share with you are 4 common themes that we've seen based on my personal experience, based on the experience of people that work at our company, and just what we've observed within our community as well. So I'll share with you a couple things that we've learned from changing and thinking about how people learn online. So the first thing that's been happening on Skillshare is that the role of the teacher has completely morphed and changed. It's been really awesome to observe it, from the sidelines. And the teacher now kind of moves into this role of being a curator or a facilitator. And what they've been doing is removing themselves from being the center of everything and putting the student at the center. And what they're doing is curating this entire experience around that. So I'll share one of my favorite classes. It was by these 2 teachers that started a design studio, and they were teaching a class on rock poster design. So, they obviously, are really well at their craft. They taught, they designed this poster from the Black Keys. And what they did is they started curating this experience. So the first thing they did is they put together like 6 to 8 minute, really short videos, very well produced, that anyone could watch at any time. Because the idea is, why do you have to lecture over and over and over again? Most teachers now, what they're doing, they're spending a lot of time putting together really short snippets of what they're going to teach, and then they focus all their energy on everything else. So kind of putting the lecturing more of a supporting mechanism versus the center. The second thing they do is they hold these live office hours online. So students from all over the world will ask questions in real time, and then the teachers will respond. They'll also give feedback on a lot of the work that the students are doing, which is really awesome to see. The other things that the teachers will do, they'll start curating all these articles and videos and resources that other students should watch during the class. Another thing we've started noticing is this notion of collaboration versus competition. So traditional education, it's all about competing with other students. It's all about ranking yourselves. And the only way you could do that is making it very, very, very objective. But what we're starting to see is a lot of collaboration happening on Skillshare, and a lot of the work and a lot of the things that students are doing are very subjective. So this is one of the students in the class. So on the left, you could see that he's starting to sketch and starting to put together the idea for some rock poster design he's going to do for James Blake. And what the students will do is they'll start posting this stuff online, and other students from all over the world. So Bob is in Indianapolis, the guy that posted up is San Francisco, and they'll just go back with feedback on what the students can do. The other thing we're starting to notice too is students from all around the world will either meet up online through a Google Hangout, or they'll meet in person. So if there's a bunch of students in Vegas taking this class, they'll actually meet in person, share their work and collaborate together. The third thing is all the classes online have moved and shifted to being completely project-based. So the basic idea is that students will learn by doing with other people, and there are no tests or quizzes on Skillshare. There's no forms of accreditation. It's all about the real work that you create. So the student that created James Blake, this is actually what he ended up creating for that class. Some other things that we've seen in that class is, this is another student that designed a poster on Postal Service, and another one around the Saltwater Sound Syndicate. So as these students are taking these classes, because it's completely project-based and challenge-based, they're doing all the work together and leads them to get here. The most interesting thing we're seeing is 2 things. One is traditional education assumes that because we're all a certain age group, that we should all learn at the same pace. So everyone that's 16 should be in the 10th grade, and you should all learn. And if there's someone behind, that's we have to pull them ahead, or it doesn't really matter. We're all going at the same pace. What we're starting to see is because it's so collaborative and there's a huge community around these classes, that some students, like any marathon, they start sprinting, they kind of go ahead above the other students. And what usually happens is a student that's behind will ask a question or ask for some help, and the student that's ahead will help them, and then they'll pull them up. So essentially what's happening in this little tight-knit group around each class is all the students are turning into teachers almost in real time. Because there's no way that the two guys from DK and G can teach the 1,000 students who are taking this class other than the students teaching each other. So that's one thing that we're seeing that's really cool. And then the last thing, which I'll close with, is since all these classes are happening online, and because the teachers get to pick what they want to teach and the students are very democratic in where they want to roll in, all the successful classes that we've seen have been into these what we call like real world skills. So if you had to choose between biology 101 or taking a class on rocket poster design, I'm assuming most people choose the latter. Unless you want to become a doctor, you should definitely take biology. And I teach as well, so I taught a class on how to launch your startup idea. And the coolest thing as a teacher is seeing something happen with your student. And he took my class online. He was part of my office hours. I responded to a lot of his questions, and yeah, he ended up launching a sock company. Got it funding on Kickstarter. I know Indiegogo's next, but not my choice that he chose Kickstarter. But it was really cool to see him come up with an idea in my class, take my class, finish it, and then 3 months later send me this link that 253 people backed this sock company is going to make. So with that, the only thing I would love to close with is education is one of those things that every single person has experienced in this room. Everybody went to school. But just because that's the way you learn does not mean that's the way you're supposed to learn in the future. And if there's anything you could take away, it's that learning is really fun. You're allowed to be curious. And what we usually see, and I hope you do, is you follow your passions. And I think that's what education is supposed to do. So thank you.
Question. Does anyone have a question? You and Ja.
So what's the difference between what you're doing at Udacity or Coursera?
I think the biggest difference is, so the biggest question is what's the difference between what we're doing and what Udacity is doing? It literally is the difference between real world skills and academia. So on Skillshare, you would never see like a history class or a one-on-one class that you'd find in academia. And the main reason is by the time a school like Stanford could teach something, it's about 2 years to 5 years outdated. They're teaching CS classes on technologies that were pretty relevant 5 years ago, but are not relevant today. And the other thing we're starting to see is we have a very high completion rate for all of our projects. So we're seeing for every class, we're seeing about 20–30% of students completing them. And I just read an article about Coursera, where they partnered with Duke University. They had about 12,000 students enroll in this class. They ended up getting 300 actually completing the class, which is, I think, like 0.3% or some really low number around there. And my basic reason, if I had to give a reason of why that is I think a lot of those topics are just not interesting. And they're really outdated and old. Their model is very lecture-based. It's watch a bunch of videos and then take a test, which I think is not the best way people should learn.